All right, I think we are live, and we are going to be talking about Excalibur, the third book in the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. Very excited to be here with my two guests. We thought we'd have a bigger war band today, but alas, it's just the three of us. But we'll make the most of it, won't we? I mean, that's just, kind of like what happens in the trilogy, the survivors at the end. That's us, right?
We'll make them feel like they're missing out.
Yeah,
they are missing out.
It's not the size of the warband. It's the heart that we have.
That's right. It's how much heart we can give to this, and we do want to acknowledge our good friends. First of all, look at this guy in the chat here. Okay, all right, there he is.
Oh,
We did get a nice little heart from Ed. So yeah, unfortunately, Ed had to be somewhere else, and it's important actually where he is. So we are missing Ed.
Yes,
and Will, you're going to have to take up the slack and make all the cheese jokes.
I will try my very best.
Yeah,
it's a heavy weight. Those cheese jokes.
Okay. He's actually Will typing from the future. Okay, we believe you.
Others would doubt you, Ed, but we don't doubt you.
Well, I guess we are on the topic. I'm personally a cheddar man. So I don't know.
You know what? I agree. Sometimes simple's the best, isn't it? I know Ed loves a Wensleydale, but yeah, cheddar for me.
I concur. Brie. I like a nice brie. Those are.
Okay. I'm not as much of a soft cheese guy. I'm more of a hard cheese guy.
Okay, so I guess true to you, Durfell would appreciate your love for hard cheese because he's
Merlin. I'm convinced that Merlin based or that Bernard Cornwell based Merlin on Ed actually.
I think so as well.
Yeah, but as a warrior, when you're taking your warriors kit, you need hard cheese, right? Soft cheese isn't going to do you much good when it's been sitting in your pack for all those miles you're trudging through. Like you need hard cheese. So.
That's right,
of course.
So Ed had to be elsewhere, but and also we were going to have the two guys from 2toRamble here as well, but they are busy with important life events, and unfortunately weren't able to finish the book in time. But there is a possibility that we may meet with them over on their channel. That possibility was raised for a conversation about the Warlord Chronicles. So we'll see. That may happen. You never know. So, but we are here. We are going to talk about Excalibur. But before we get into spoilers for that, we are going to give our just spoiler-free assessments of the trilogy as a whole, of Excalibur specifically, and just talk about where we would, where we place this among our favorites of all time, if it even merits a place in our favorites of all time. I actually know that my two guests do believe so. So I'll let Will talk first. What was your experience? This was a reread for you, right? So what was your experience with the trilogy? How do you rate it? And where do you rate Excalibur among the three books?
So I can talk a bit more about the nuances when we're in the spoiler chat. But so I read this series for the first time about 7 years ago. And so I think I was 15. And so it's a very formative series for me. And it really explored kind of grittier historical fiction that still maintained that heroism. And I thought that was just a fantastic balance. I love classic fantasy and I love modern fantasy, but sometimes the modern fantasy is a bit too dark and I want some of that hope. And so, like your works, Philip, that magnificent kind of connection of the two. Just say I'm very lucky to be chatting about this with two incredible authors.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm looking forward to asking you some questions about parts of Excalibur, actually. But anyway, so I read that series at a very formative time in my life, and it absolutely inspired me to read so much more, especially historical fiction. And forevermore, Arthurian legend will have a very special place in my heart. And then this reread, it was very interesting, actually. The first time round, I preferred Enemy of God, and that's the one that stuck with me. But this time, from a more analytical perspective, I think Excalibur really stood out to me. And I can talk about exactly why when we're in the spoiler section, but I absolutely loved it. For me, Arthurian legend, it boils down to the relationship between heroism and tragedy. And there is so much of both, sadly, inflicting a lot of pain on myself rereading this. So thanks for that, Philip and PL, making me go through this pain. But it is just such an incredible journey. And Yeah, so this is basically going to be an hour of me saying, I love this book. You should read it.
Okay. So is it among your favorites of all time then, Will?
Yeah, definitely. And I think Excalibur now takes that top spot over Enemy of God, and it's in my top 5 historical fiction books of all time. Maybe top 3.
Top 3 historical fiction. Okay. All right. Now I think PL has he can top that even, I think. But yeah.
Well, I think I have to echo my friend Will's words. Will unfortunately opened up. He did it. He went there. He opened up the can of worms. Is this historical fiction? Is it fantasy? Is it historical fantasy? Well, we have you to blame for starting this debate again. But we still love you, though. However, I will say that just like Will, this is a reread for me. This trilogy is already my top trilogy of all time. I never foresaw a day when The Lord of the Rings would be eclipsed by any trilogy. Go back 15, 20 years. If you told me 15, 20 years ago that you would put another trilogy above The Lord of the Rings, I would have said you're crazy. However, that has happened since I've read this trilogy. Again, I am a deep lover of Arthurian fiction. I think until I read this, I would have had to say that T.H. White, The Once and Future King, and Le Morte d'Arthur by Thomas Malory would have been my top Arthurian tales of all time. There's many I've read, some really fabulous interpretations, but I think those would have been the top of the echelon. But this took the cake. I think with this book in particular, on the reread, and it's so amazing what you can discover on a reread. I found that the thing that was so compelling about this book was seeing your favorite characters do some of the most detestable things, but it really rounded out and honed the characters properly because, as you know, both of you who've read my work, and I can certainly say this for Philip, we love fully realized characters. We love to see the darkness and the light. We realize that the human beings were flawed. The best people can do some horrible things, and the worst people can do some good things. And I think you really and truly saw that in this book. And I think it certainly wasn't to the detriment of the narrative. Let's face it. I think we would all agree. I'm not trying to speak for you gentlemen, but I think we all agree. We love Durfell. He's one of my favorite characters of all time. Durfell is hard not to love. However, we do see Durfell and some other characters do some absolutely reprehensible things that perhaps make us change our opinion, if not of the character themselves who commit these in some cases atrocities, but it does change our outlook on what it takes to survive in this brutal, bleak Britain that is not the the sanitized, romanticized, beautiful knights in shining armor. Have you seen many Arthurian interpretations where everyone is mostly noble? These people are real. And it feels real, it's gritty, and it is just so well done. And I have to say now, after rereading Excalibur, just like Will, Enemy of God would have taken my top spot within if I rank the trilogy itself. Now I think this is the best book.
Okay. Wow. All right. So some love for Excalibur in particular, but for the trilogy as a whole. And I will say that I'm the only one for whom this was the first time through the Warlord Chronicles. And I loved this trilogy. It was fantastic. I do love a good Arthurian tale. I'd have to say my favorite is probably Sir Gawain and the Green Knight in Middle English, which is just one of the most self-aware and fascinating, in my opinion, examples of Arthurian literature.
That doesn't surprise me, Philip.
Yeah, I'm a medievalist.
Yeah, we're not shocked.
But it's very humorous and it's fun and lighthearted in some ways, but also just testing the boundaries of chivalry and the ideals to which these people aspire, but they fall short, because they're human, and sometimes even chivalry gives us contradictory ideals that clash against each other. So anyway, I love what Sir Gawain and the Green Knight does, but this is wonderful. And I would, if I were to make a video, like I've seen a few people recently, and I think it's a great idea, top 10 trilogy videos. This would make it onto the list, probably. Yeah, I'm not probably, definitely. This would make it onto my top 10 trilogies of all time. I'm not 100% sure it would make it onto my top 10 just flat out stories or series of all time. It would have to be considered. I would say that. Would does it displace Malazan or Lord of the Rings or Realm of the Elderlings for me? No, it can't touch those. But I loved it. So it's up there. It's up there. And some of the things I really admire about Cornwell's writing, first of all, he is very grounded in history, and it is not, in my opinion, straight up historical fiction, only because we don't know a whole lot about this time period. A lot of it is really dark. It's the Dark Ages, right? So a lot of it we just don't know really what happened. Arthur almost certainly was not anything like any of the stories, if there was an Arthur even. And there's just a lot shrouded in mystery. Secondly, there's just a lot as the books. I noticed that as each book went by, the first book I felt like, okay, it's ambiguous. The magic is ambiguous. There's an implication that it could be just a matter of the druids and whatnot knowing how to fool people. Like they have some good tricks up their sleeves, but they're really just tricks. There's not real magic going on. You could, I think, have that interpretation from the first book. Once you get in the second book, it's unambiguously magic. There are things that happen that are magic. And then the third book, even more so. There are a couple key events, which we can talk about when we do spoilers, which are clearly magic. And for me, that pushes it even further over into fantasy rather than historical fiction. But we're not here to actually debate that so much, although I'm open to...
Yes, we are, Philip. Yes, we are.
That's how I had this hour scheduled. Debate, historical fiction, fantasy.
Yeah.
No,
So,
on my reread, I did notice, I think some of the fantastical elements had faded in my memory slightly. And then some of the moments I was like, yeah, that really is more fantasy than history, isn't it?
I mean, to me, there's no way you can explain this story without just saying, yeah, that was magic, and at least a couple times in here. So we'll talk about those examples. I'm sure you two know what I'm talking about, but yeah, I mean, I loved it. It was a lot of fun. I'm so glad I finally read this, and I will probably read it again someday. I do want to read more Cornwell, though. I'd like to get further in the Saxon series, which I know Will, you've finished. Is that right?
I have the final installment left.
Final one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And PL, how about you? Have you finished the Saxon series?
Oh yes. Oh yes. Oh yes. Now that is my favorite historical fiction series. Whether you want to call it The Last Kingdom, whether you want to call it the Saxon Stories, whatever you want to call it, that's my favorite historical fiction series of all time.
Yeah. I've only read The Last Kingdom, the first book in that series, which I thought was great. So,
on the topic of other kind of Arthurian works as well, I'm interested. Have either of you read Giles Christian's Arthurian Tales?
not yet. You guys keep
no.
talking about them, and you put them on my radar for sure. Yeah.
That's much more historical, but the prose is much more fantastical and lyrical.
Huh.
So it reminds me of a bit more archaic kind of Arthurian legend.
You have me intrigued. Color me intrigued.
Giles Christian is probably in my top 5 kind of prose writers that I just fall in love with the stories, and it feels like he was just made for the Arthurian legend. Especially book 1 and book 3, especially just really stand out to me because they're standalones but tied together.
Okay. No, this is Giles Christian's. What is the series called, Will?
Arthurian Tales, and book 1 is Lancelot. So that's a self-contained story.
Okay.
Yeah, they're already on my TBR.
Lancelot than we see in this series.
Yeah, I mean, I would hope this was. I mean, I don't think it's a spoiler to say the Lancelot in here is easily the most loathsome Lancelot ever written.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had mentioned that on the previous chat with Philip that my first introduction to a Lancelot that was not impeccably good looking, peerless in his moral, etc., was actually the Once Future King, where Lancelot was at least described as physically ugly and somewhat ambitious and conflicted and having, some problematic issues. But, Cornwell, of course, takes it to a whole new level. Yeah. Lancelot is a despicable villain. And I absolutely love that twist that he added compared to some of the other Arthurian tales that I've
a very different
Yeah.
take on Gawain as well. We'll have to talk about that, and
Yeah.
several key characters. And there were some moments that I had predicted from book one, and I saw them happen here. It's only because I know Arthurian legend, and I thought, there's no way Cornwell will be able to not do this or this, because this, even though he took tremendous liberties, really. I mean, his version is very different in many senses, primarily in that rather than having this feel like high Middle Ages, which is totally anachronistic, Cornwell makes it actually feel like Dark Age Britain, which is not usually what, I mean, even though it is supposed to be Dark Age Britain, the Arthurian tales almost never feel like Dark Age Britain. They usually feel like high Middle Ages, which is when they were written for the most part. Except for some of the in the Mabinogion, for example, there's some older, Arthurian stories. Whoops, we lost PL. I'm sure he will be back. But yeah, for me, this was just a really well done in terms of the historical fiction elements being as historical fiction-y as you could with this. It does really feel like Dark Age Britain, and that's because of Cornwell's extensive research, undoubtedly, and his just great abilities as a historical fiction writer. Because I know everything else he does is unambiguously historical fiction. So we'll give it.
Yeah, definitely. And I really enjoy. Obviously, and won't say spoilers yet. The subversions in terms of Lancelot, Gwynne, so many of these ideas. I love how he explains our stories now. In that how kind of stories are basically lies and told by the victors, and how they're carried away in these different narratives. I absolutely loved how it always made me upset that maybe I'm hearing a version of a character that's been twisted, because they need poets and scolds to sing great versions of themselves. And I just love that kind of attention to detail of how a legend can evolve over time.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And I apologize, folks. I was in the Dark Ages myself for a second with no internet, so forgive me for the temporary absence. But as you know, and again, I love the theme that nothing that we read can be trusted to be entirely accurate, because, as Will said, everything that is written by potentially someone with an agenda, specifically to interpret those events in a certain way. And then if you multiply that times 10 down through the ages, are we ever truly getting an accurate account of something that happened, what someone was like? Have their deeds been aggrandized for the sake of making them more popular because politically that was, politically expedient for the time? Have their horrible deeds been minimized for the same reason, or have they been turned into a villain where really they were a hero because the author didn't like them? Those are things that I love. I love that thinking. It is upsetting, as Will said. It is upsetting to think about. I think for all of us who, especially on the scholastic level, on the academic level, we want to believe in the veracity of, say, a textbook, a history textbook, that this is somewhat of an accurate description of what someone was like, what their life was like, what they liked, what they didn't like, who they liked, what they did. But again, unfortunately, the fact of the matter is we truly can't.
Yeah,
that's so true. And a lot of that is achieved through the frame narration, where you mentioned Dervel already, PL, and he is our narrator. But we've got this frame narration where he's an old man telling the story and recording the story for posterity. So that is a brilliant thing that Cornwell did, in my opinion, because it allows these themes that you're talking about, the idea that who records history and how it gets tweaked by the victors, the bards, the popular opinion and whatnot. So that's a really important theme. And it also is a reason why we love Dervel so much, is that we're getting his POV, his perspective, and the first person narration worked really well for this. It is I think a bit of a risk in some ways, because with first person, it's easy to get super attached to your main POV, who is the first person, the narrator, and see the nuance in their thoughts and feel that they're three-dimensional. The harder thing is with the other characters, the secondary characters. There's a risk there and there's certain authors who do it really, really well, like Robin Hobb in the Fitz books, particularly in my opinion in Tawny Man and in Fitz and the Fool. those to me are just how to do first-person narration really well and create emotional investment in many characters, not just the narrator.
Yeah.
For me, there were lots of characters I was emotionally invested in here in Warlord Chronicles, but none as much as Dervel. And then it just sort of went down from, you know, the more important characters to some characters where I would have thought you could have gotten. This is not what Cornwell was going for, so I get it. But like, you know, Dervel has children, right? And they're not developed characters really at all. You don't get to know them intimately or anything like that. So they're just, you know, the other examples too. But you know, for the most part, I feel like the emotional impact is easier to, I think, in a third person narration in many ways to achieve. Whereas with first person, if you don't really take pains to develop those secondary characters, the emotional impact is harder to achieve, I think. But I think his world building and historical, you know, know-how and all that is just, it shouts off the page here. So.
Yeah. If there's 2 points I could build off there, Philip, one is that Devil I love having him as a central character. I was very lucky after I read this series for the first time. I was at college and I was writing, so it's called an extended project, and you get a certificate for it, and you can basically write an essay that's 7,000 words and whatever you want. So I wrote about the Arthurian of the evolution of the Arthurian legend. And I emailed a bunch of authors, and somehow I still think I might have dreamt it. Bernard Cornwell answered.
Wow.
And I asked him about why Devil was the central character, and he said it did feel like quite a risk that when people pick up a book about Arthurian legend, they want a familiar character. And Devil was actually in the very early kind of Arthurian tales, very, 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 very early. And I think he was dropped by Geoffrey of Monmouth, maybe. It's a bit hazy in my mind now. But so he was there, but he's not familiar to us. And so that he felt that was quite a risk. And then it's quite ironic thinking that we're here talking about how he's the strongest character out of them all. And I absolutely just love how there is so much more to unmask because it's his perspective that he is obviously nuanced. And I think that Bernard Cornwell really plays with the fact that he neglects to talk about some things because they're too painful, or he doesn't care about them. And you still feel like he has secrets. Like when it talks about Arthur and Guinevere's reunion, I won't go into further details. We're not in the spoilers yet, but there is more to be said there. But he kind of just leaves it, and that's more powerful. I think he really plays with the first-person narrative really well. And on the other point about secondary characters, I would say any great book, I feel you want more pages. And if there's anything I would want more of, it would be more of those secondary characters. I think in certain installments, some characters, my only criticism really of this series is certain characters are neglected a bit and then picked up a lot more in the next installment. And so later on we can talk about who those characters are, but I feel like if 50 more pages, a bit more meat to each installment would have given us more of that lore that I just want to read about these characters, basically just eating cheese around a fire with each other. I would have loved an extra scene of that in each book, the whole cast all together, minus Lancelot.
Hopefully cheddar.
I have to say too that Bernard Cornwell is a huge influence on me as a writer. You know, and you know, whether it's that slowly peeling back the layer to discern whether or not the magic is real or not. There's so many things I could get into that he's. Oh, thank you. Well, he's influenced me, but I also have a wonderful story about Bernard Cornwell, just because, you know, it's rare that we actually talk about the author itself, but I know we can't devote a lot of time to that, but still, a wonderful gentleman that I've never met. However, my stepdaughter knew how much I admired him as an author and what influence he was on me on his writing, and she actually wrote to him and sent her a copy of my book. And he wrote back and said, "Hey, this sounds amazing. I don't want to know if and when I'm going to get to it. However, I understand it's your stepfather's birthday, and he sent me a framed plaque with his signature in it, and, you know, said good luck with your and it hangs in my office still today." And you know, and you can imagine I was just so overwhelmed. First of all, I would love for my stepmother, because that she would do that, and it was a surprise. But just that, you know, here's an author that took the time to do something special, you know, in the life of one of his fans. That really meant a lot. So you know, but I also want to quickly comment that, you know, specifically about the secondary characters. and what both you and Will mentioned, Philip, and elaborate on that. I think very much, and I could be totally wrong, but Cornwell's intent was to have us. It was part of building the character of Durfell and us loving him and feeling for him and being horrified and sad for him with what happens to his family and his friends, rather than building those characters themselves. So we got to, it was all about how we felt about angry and sad and that sense of vengeance, wanting to go out with Durfell and exact vengeance against those family members that have been wronged, rather than per se building up those family members as characters themselves. So I think that was the intent. I think why perhaps some of those characters were fleshed out, because the focus was to make us love Durfell more and to make him this iconic character that I think he's become. And the other thing I would mention, I think we talked about briefly, I just want to touch on quickly that Will, in the prior discussion for Will's edification, that Phil and I talked about the fact that, as we know, whether it's Western society with priests or Eastern society with clerics, oftentimes it was the priests, the religious figures that were the scribes and transcribers, and the ones that documented history. They were the ones that are educated. They could read, they can write. They were typically, in some cases, closer to the nobility and the rulers. So they had this, they were and sometimes tasked as the chroniclers, essentially. So that's why we get so much of our history written and down through the ages from these figures. And it's ironic that Durfell has this perspective.
Uh-oh. We're going to miss the irony here.
Oh, no.
It was ironic that PL was about to tell us what he was about to tell us. And
Just as he cuts off.
Oh, no.
It's like the internet shows its moment.
Yeah, he'll be back. He'll be back.
He will be back.
But anyway, yeah. So I do think we've been dancing around the spoilers for a bit now. So it's probably time for us to leap straight into the spoilers. And there's just a ton of great moments in here, but I won't say what my favorites are. What are some of your favorite moments that you want to talk about? PL is back.
So sorry for my internet. I don't know what's going on. I'm in the country, so sometimes it's erratic. So
yeah, did you want to finish what you were saying? We missed you at the irony. Whoops.
Fell, and are you still there?
Yep. We're here.
Yeah, I just want to say that I believe that Durfell should have, of anybody, that balanced perspective of being both the pagan and the Christian priest. So technically, as unreliable narrator as he is, he seems to have a certain amount of self-awareness to capture the positives of both sides.
Great point. Yeah, that is a great point. And we do have a lot in here about this period where there is a transition happening from paganism to Christianity. It's a big part of the story, actually, in multiple ways, because you have the British paganism, and you have the British Christians, but you also have the Anglo-Saxon invaders who are pagan for the most part at this period as well. The religious conflict is a big aspect of this as well, which I think Cornwell handles really well. Captures a lot of nuance there. You still have some remnants of Roman influence as well with Mithras and that kind of thing, mix in the mix. So yeah. All right. We are ready to go for spoilers now. You two ready for spoilers?
Oh yeah. Let me get my notebook out.
Bring it on. Bring it on.
So PL, I just asked Will to give me one of his favorite moments that he wants to talk about. If you as well, when you're ready. But Will, let's start with you. What are one of your favorite moments in Excalibur?
I mean, Bernard Cornwell is known as a king of action scenes, and we've talked about the investment with Derval and the characters. I think it is exceptional that even though we know Derval survives, the amount of tension I feel in the action sequences. So the Battle of Badon on the Mount, how it feels like a fantasy battle, how epic it is. Growing up, Papa Gwynne always said there's two series to him that really historical fiction or historical fantasy that feel like fantasy. And that was Boudica series by Amanda Scott. And then the Warlord Chronicles as well in terms of scale, because the thing with history is you're often constrained by what actually happened. And the writers do have to adapt certain events that maybe they would prefer to make it more epic, but they can't. But Bernard Cornwell manages to keep, the numbers aren't crazy, but just what happens, the twists, the turns, the revelations, Merlin turning up, and different forces, and also the repercussions as well of Arthur having to give up basically his rulership. There's just so much at stake. It is just fantastic. And some really emotional moments as well with like Kina Glass, who it may not be your favorite character and may not have been given the most page time, but I think one of the feats for an author is to have you attached to characters with a small page time, and he really shows that he achieved that in those moments where, even though I knew what was coming because I've read this before, I was turning the page really slowly, so it would take a bit longer to get there. And so, yeah, the action scenes, that one especially, really stuck out to me.
Yeah, when he accepted the challenge by Cherditch's champion there, Kina Glass, the king of Powys, was really outmatched there. And
Leofa.
Yeah,
Yes.
Leofa. So yeah, that was a really well done scene though, and an emotional one. And I was surprised, you mentioned this briefly, Will, but I continually was surprised by how small the armies were in these battles, and I assume that Cornwell has done his research in this matter. But we're talking about battles with a few hundred people on each side for the most part. Like 1,000 soldiers is a huge army there. And I'm used to reading fantasy with like 60,000 soldiers or whatever. And even in medieval history, you can often have battles with several thousand at least. But this seemed like really small in some ways. But as you say, he does the action stuff so well that it feels really epic anyway, you know?
Yeah. So. And then just picking up on that, I think that really captures the momentum shifts where champions mean so much. And so obviously we're usually following the leaders, the captains, the generals, the great warriors, the strategists. And so when one of them falls or one of them rises, you see this momentum shift that I think feels really believable. When maybe in a fantastical battle or a battle later in history with 10, 20, 30,000 people, it wouldn't be as believable to think one death can shift so much. Right. Whereas you really do feel that everything hinges on one decision in these battles here.
Great point. Yeah. So the impact of that is greater because of the relatively small size of the sides. Yeah. No, good. Well said. Yeah. PL, what's a great moment in this for you?
Well, I can definitely go to the battles. I just want to quickly say that Will's exceptional point about, I mean, I always I like being a history nerd. Hey, Timothy, another great author himself, Timothy Wolf. I've always been appreciative of being a history nerd and someone who has put a lot of time reading and researching medieval combat, that, you know, so many of these famous battles only involved a few thousand soldiers at the most. And that people don't realize that it was rare to have a confrontation with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of soldiers facing off against each other. Right, for a variety of reasons, that armies simply weren't that big. Populations weren't that big to be able to field armies that big. So when you actually got those momentous clashes, those were rare. So I love the fact that Cornwell stuck to that. You know, but I think the smaller scale created an intimacy in some ways that was really I really appreciated. And to Will's point, I love big scale battles. But who doesn't love that clash of champions, that one-on-one? When Durfell, and you know, Durfell now has had several major duels. He has reputation, right? And we see him fight Leof as well. And now he gets a bit of advance warning about Leof's tactics. Managed to defeat him, spares his life.
From Boris, right? Boris of all people.
That was a fantastic duel. But again, when he takes on the champion during the battle, and I think what was so well done about that scene, and this isn't my favorite scene now, I don't want to go in too long, but what was the fact that Durfell, that Kynwyn and his children were watching, and you know, he goes down because he has to. He's the leader of the command of the entire, or what's left of this army taking refuge.
You're talking about on Mount Baden.
On Mount Baden, he goes down, he takes them out, and you know, and this is all because their children. They don't even know who the children are, but the children have been kidnapped, and unfortunately they're put to death. But, you know, this is all, Durfell puts himself on the line because he feels, how can we not love a man like this with that kind of courage? And, you know, and yes, it is part of the reputation, all that, but I thought it was a fabulous, fabulous scene. And then afterwards, when Kind happens, what would we have done if you died? Well, my love, you would have burned me, right? And because the battle would have had to go on had he fell, right? But he needs to take on this one-on-one duel. But I'm going to give you quickly my favorite moment of the book, and it has nothing to do with battles. It was my realization of the when we talked about this earlier, and I mentioned that unfortunately people are people, and someone I work with in my job, you know, I've worked in law enforcement years. I remember one of the old timers told me one of my first days on the job that people are people. There are no good or bad people. They're just people. And I saw that very theme come up very much in this book. And I specifically saw this in this particular instance. As we know by this book, Arthur has been betrayed by Guinevere. He's bitter. He's angry. Mm-hmm. And although Arthur is the hero of the book, discounting Derfel, but Arthur, this is the tale of Arthur. Arthur, think about this. Arthur, who betrayed Cynwyn, broke his marriage proposal, broke his allegiances, made the land run red with blood, destroyed the peace and stability he worked so hard to build up, started a war, all because he wanted to elope with Guinevere because he fell in love with her at his betrothal feast to Cynwyn, right? All these things that happened all because of that, right? And he and Derfel are supposed to be best bros. And what does Arthur do? Arthur makes a move on Cynwyn. Arthur tries to convince Cynwyn to run off with him, leave his supposed best friend Derfel. So, I mean, think about this, right? Like when I was reading this, I almost because I'm someone who loves morally gray characters and I love characters that are well fleshed out.
Do you?
I thought it was brilliant, but I also hated Arthur in that moment because, dude, can you not be satisfied? How could you betray Derfel like that? How could you, after you caused this entire situation and you cast Cynwyn aside, now because Guinevere betrayed you, you realize, oh, maybe I made a mistake, and but more than that, to betray your friend, to betray Derfel, that was, I reread that many times over when Cynwyn said, to Derfel, Arthur, Arthur, he's trying to make moves on me, but of course I brushed him aside. And Derfel didn't seem to make much of it at all the time, but I did. As a reader, I was outraged for Derfel. I know Derfel loves Arthur, and their relationship has been fractured, but Arthur has become much more of a bit more bitter, cynical person after Guinevere has betrayed him. But I thought for him to turn around and do that, I was outraged. But that actually was one of my favorite moments. I know it wasn't a stunning battle scene, but that was actually one of my favorite moments of the book.
Yeah. I think that really highlights one of Bernard Cornwell's skills as well, in that he really, I think, puts himself in the shoes of the reader, in that he knows we'll forgive Arthur because we love Derfel, and Derfel forgives him. It reminds me when I first read Enemy of God, and when Tristan is allowed to die, I shut the book and I said to Papa Gwynne, I will never forgive Arthur. And he put a hand on my shoulder and he said, son, you will. You will. Wow. And I had the exact same when I then got to Excalibur, and I had that moment. And I was like, how? I can't forgive him again. And again, Papa Gwynne put his hand on my shoulder and he said, you will. And then later on, you're so invested in what happens to Arthur, and it's because you care so much about Derfel. And I just think it just shows Bernard Cornwell knows exactly how to kind of manipulate the reader. He's got his strings and he's pulling you in his direction. Whereas I think it'd be a different kind of direction if Arthur was the central POV. I don't think you could do that as much.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, Will. And I think he starts in the forgiveness in the reader by first having Cynwyn say, but he didn't really mean it, he made a move on me, but he's depressed, and he didn't, nothing would have happened. So, and she just kind of, and I also love how low key Derfel is all the time. That's a big part of his personality, is that he's just such a, laconic individual in some ways, that's one of the things I love about him. But another thing that Cornwell does really well, and I'll make this one of my favorite moments in Excalibur, is how he surprises me. Even though I know this story, I know the Arthurian myth, and inside and out. And that makes me, in some ways, I predict a lot of what's going to happen. So how does he make up for that? Well, he surprises me still. And a good example is where boy, this is such a tough moment too, when Dervel is captured by Amhar close to the end, and he is brought to that camp, and he has his beard cut, and he is abused, and we know Amhar's gonna hand him over to Loholt, his brother, because Dervel was the one who held Loholt's hand when Arthur chopped off his hand. And I thought, okay, this is how Dervel loses his left hand. Obviously, he gets his hand chopped off by Loholt while he's a captive here, and somehow he escapes. I don't know how, but he's got to have his hand chopped off first. This is what's going to happen, right? Well, no, that's not what happens to his hand. He escapes. Actually, Taliesin, by the way, this is one example of magic in there, where Taliesin comes and he sings everyone to sleep, and he brings a fog for Dervel to escape. There's no way you could tell me that's not magic.
Coincidence.
Yeah, the second fog, if you count magic, if you count
Merlin did it before.
That's for the cauldron, exactly. They escaped from the island by the fog.
So, but anyway, yeah, whether it's magic or not, Dervel escapes. He loses his hand later when Nimue has gone complete like evil hag mode, and she is using Kynwyn and torturing her horribly, giving her boils and giving her all kinds of horrible illnesses and everything through her magic. Again, magic, the clay person that she is putting, berries in where she wants to give her a boil. And it seems to actually really work. Like, she makes her ill through this magic that she learned from Merlin. And Merlin, of course, has his own clay man, and he's being tortured at the same time by Nimue at this point, which is, I knew that Nimue was going to kill Merlin somehow or other, because that's usually how it goes in Arthurian myth, but I didn't know how it was going to happen here. So this was really different, but it's one of the most beautiful moments in the whole trilogy for me is when Dervel is faced with a decision. Essentially, they get Morgan. There's so much tension in all of this, and so many, so much conflict in all of this, because Morgan is now a Christian, a staunch Christian, doesn't want to have anything to do with this. But she finds, okay, I can get something out of this. I have an advantage here. Okay, Dervel, you're going to become a Christian if you want my help, and also you're going to swear to be. And that's how we find out Dervel was the subservient to that idiot Samson, right? It was because he agrees to Morgan's demands and says, okay, if you can save Kynwyn. And at the last minute, Morgan she's kind of mean about it. She's like, saves it for the last minute. Oh, by the way, you have to chop off your hand where you have that scar. This was beautifully set up, that scar, which was, that scar was important because it was the bond between Dervel and Nimue. And it meant something positive and beautiful for the first couple books. It's what brings him to rescue Nimue from the island of the crazies, in the earlier book. And what just a sign of their deep friendship and their common upbringing and everything. And then it becomes this means by which Nimue hurts Kynwyn, and he makes that sacrifice. Yeah. He chops off that hand in order to save Kynwyn. He doesn't even really have to think about it. He's like, okay, that's it. I'm doing it, right? And that's how he loses a hand. And I thought, okay, Cornwell, that's some damn good storytelling right there.
Yeah. That actually leads on to a question I wanted to ask you too. I think Brendan Cornwell, he takes quite a strange, atypical structure that really pays off in terms of, usually most books you can have a build, an event, an order dip, and then a big build, and then a big climactic event. And then PL, you've got quite an atypical structure in a Drowned Kingdom that really pays off and really had me on my toes. And Philip, you as well, especially across the entire trilogy, where book 2 feels like your kind of classic end to a series, and then book 3 completely just reinvents the wheel in a fantastic way. When you spot kind of other narratives that are a bit atypical, does it kind of inspire you in that way and make you realize that sometimes we need something a bit different to really hook us?
Yeah, PL, why don't you go first and answer Will's question? I think
that's an exceptional question, Will. As I mentioned from the onset, I'm a huge Bernard Cornwell fan. He's a huge inspiration on me as a writer. I would say Bernard Cornwell, January, Mark Lawrence, George R. Martin. Those are some of my biggest influences. I totally believe that, especially for, frankly, I'm just going to say this, for me and how I can see myself as being an indie author. I think that comes with the ability to be, in my opinion, I'm not saying that you can't have fresh and exciting traditionally published books. I think being about indie is all about being daring, taking chances, not sticking to traditional, conventional things, doing something a bit different. And I think for me, I purposefully write that way. I don't write that way to make it off-putting for my reader, but I write it also because I feel that in some cases, we as authors often write things, unfortunately, and there's reason for it, as plot contrivances. Mm-hmm. We do things specifically because it fits the story we're trying to tell. But let's face facts, life doesn't work like that. Life isn't all about, well, everything rises towards this action, and then there's a denouement, and that, like, life doesn't work like that, right? It's like a roller coaster, right? And I think I like writing books that are like somewhat of a roller coaster. I think with my second book, it's very much like that. The what you think is the peak of the action happens, and then you think, okay, it's falling action, but then things happen afterwards that don't necessarily, might not necessarily fit with something more conventional. But what I love about the way Cornwell does it is that we'll hit the excellent point that it's hard to feel a real sense of dread for a main character, is writing a framing narrative where he's an old man telling you the tale of what happened in the past. So when he gets into these epic battles, these battles where, hundreds of people are dying, he's going to make it out, right? But you still feel, Cornwell still manages to make you feel that tension and that nervous for him and for the other characters. So I think that I love seeing books that I think it's part of subverting expectations. That element of writing, by writing not necessarily in that more straightforward, I think it's wonderful because for me as a reader, it subverts expectations, and I love to have my expectations subverted because that's the way I write.
So it's quite a conscious decision.
Yes.
Yeah, PL is a big time planner, so he knows what he's doing when he's doing it. Usually, right, PL? Is that right?
I'd like to think so. You only the reader can be the judge, right, Philip? As you know, as an author, and you too will, as a very discerning reader and someone who's going to be an author yourself. I think only the reader can judge if the way you did it is effective or not, and that's very subjective.
Yeah.
Well, the emotional beats pay off, so I think it's paid off.
Yep, and in Cornwell's case, obviously as well, I think there's major payoff for his boldness in places, and what he does, I think, really works well. And he's got the issue of, okay, he's retelling a very well-known story, very well-known. And if he strays too far in a certain way, he's going to have some upset people, right? Because this is a beloved, well-known story. So you're going to expect certain beats to happen. And, like, for example, we know Nimue is going to kill Merlin somehow or other. Okay, but he does it uniquely, doesn't he? First, he has her capture him, which is part of the usual narrative where he's often bound in a tree or something like that. And he puts a little spin on that because Merlin's in a cage made of wooden slats and so on. And he's still able to reach people through dreams, more magic, by the way. He's still able to reach people through dreams and give them instructions. And I love how ambiguous Merlin is through the whole thing, too, by the way. How we love him because, well, he does love cheese, for one thing. And he's funny, but he's also vicious and he kills children. And he's like, if it's going to bring back the gods, then he's going to do it, except for Arthur's child there, right? Where we got to talk about that for sure.
Yeah.
Because Nimue that's where she's like, Merlin, you need to go all the way, boy. And because he doesn't, she is very upset, to put it mildly, and takes things into her own hands. But what I'm trying to say is, in a very convoluted way, Cornwell is really brilliant at balancing the expected versus what's my twist on this going to be, right? I think he does that really, really well. I think she's yeah. Well, I think the point, Alan, is that you're not supposed to really enjoy it. I mean, you do have to admire her commitment to the cause, though. Nobody's more committed than Nimue. You got to give her that, right? So yeah, she's trying to bring back the gods, and she will do anything for that.
Yeah,
so will Merlin. Sorry, go ahead, Will.
No, you go first, Pierre.
No, I was just saying, so will Merlin, and I think one of the times, I admire nothing, Alan says. I think one of the times we're most upset with Merlin is what he does to Gwynne, and also being willing to sacrifice Gwydri, right? It is totally callous. There is no, as you pointed out, Philip, their aim, Merlin and Nimue, is to bring back the gods, and humans are pawns, and anyone is a potentially worthy sacrifice to do that. So whether it's a small child or a somewhat innocent dupe, like what Gawain was, this but I feel that again, that is brilliant, because you're showing us a well-rounded character that isn't, to be fair, it's all others' fault. It isn't just good or evil. They have motivations for things, and those motivations drive them to commit the actions that they do. I think that's wonderful. And I think, and I know for you, Will, especially because you've read the Saxon story / Last Kingdom, that there's some characters that kind of on a parallel in both series. In the Last Kingdom series, there's a female character that very much grows up as a childhood friend of the male character, and later on that doesn't go so well. You have the main character in the Last Kingdom being close to the seat of power, but not being the one in charge, and through that he gets to see and admire the traits of a ruler, even though he respects but doesn't always like that individual and has his issues with them. He respects ultimately the challenges and difficulties that comes with being a ruler. There's a lot of parallels between those series. Some of the characters, Will, I think you know what I'm talking about because you've read it. And Philip, when you read it, I think you'll agree. But those are some of the features that I loved about this book.
Yeah, and I haven't actually thought about it before, but raises the question with kind of Ben and Cornwell talking about morality in terms of there's moments of mercy here, which actually in the long run cause far more damage. Amhar and Lohal, they cause a lot of damage in Excalibur because they are spared.
Yeah, always forgiving his enemies. Yeah,
exactly, forgiving the wrong people. And Merlin, when he refuses to sacrifice Arthur's son, that's what ends up with him being imprisoned and all the terrible things that happen to him. And it's interesting I don't think the message is don't show mercy. It's more that this cycle of violence and the interlinked nature of heroism and tragedy, in that these moments of mercy show their heroism, but then linked to the tragedy that will happen later on. And it reminds me of a really strong moment I forgot to mention is when we go to the present day of Derval. He's writing his chronicle, and Samson gives him Hellbane. And it's such a sad moment in that Derval is an old man now. And even at this point, he is being asked to defend people who just use him, basically, by Samson, who has just been horrible to him all this time. But even Samson is giving him a weapon, saying, you're going to stand guard at night. You're not going to sleep. And you're going to protect us, even though you're a very old man who I've not allowed to live their own life for the past 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, I don't get the sense that he's doing it out of being like charitable. He wants to save his own skin. He's scared. Yeah,
exactly. And I always wonder, because it's not specifically mentioned, but I know for all three of us who've read different historical accounts of Derval, that he died as an old man, as a monk. You wonder if in Cornwell's interpretation, he doesn't show us the end, but did Derval implies that he may die with sword in hand, defending, even though he's one-handed, he's old, as Will says, he will die. His chronicle finishes, but his fate may have been that he died defending the monastery and Samson, right? And I always had in the back of my mind, is that what happens? And Cornwell leaves that ending ambiguous, but for me, that's how I, to be honest, would prefer to think of that was the conclusion. Derval, this glory, going out in a blaze of glory, rather than simply dying as an old man in bed, that he died, sword in hand, the other hand is his shield hand gone, defending, the monastery.
That's how I interpreted it, because the ending, I think it's really powerful. The last few passages are so moving, but it's also quite sudden.
Yes.
There's no aftermath. Arthur sails away, and that's basically, and then it just ends.
Yeah.
And yes, I've interpreted it in that way, sadly, but also it's the Arthurian themes kind of boiled down so
Well, he
poignantly
leaves
and
it.
perfectly.
He leaves it super ambiguous there after Camlan, the battle,
Yeah.
where they successfully repelled Mordred's forces and Nimue,'s, which kind of show up a bit late. And Dervel stays, and he throws Excalibur into the water. Much to Nimue's distress. There's a group of people on that boat that we never hear from again. Arthur, Guinevere, Dervel's daughter, and Godra and their grandkids. What happens to them? He leaves it ambiguous. We could interpret it as that ship didn't make it.
Yeah.
Or we can interpret it as there's more magic there at the end. The idea of Avalon is this place that is timeless, and the idea that Arthur is waiting to come back from there. He'll plays
be back
into
one
that.
day.
Yeah, but that's me. I don't know, and I want to specifically quickly talk about that ask both of you how you felt about ending, because I felt, because specifically leading up to this, Derfel specifically says that these people are all gone. Galahad is dead, Nimue is dead, Merlin is dead. All these people are dead. Kywin is dead. He tells us how Kywin gets
he died of a fever, though.
But he specifically says that all these people, except for me and Samson, essentially are dead. But we don't see their death, the death of all those people, as you said, Philip, that escape, we believe, to Avalon, and we know that in most of the interpretations at the end of the battle, okay, Arthur, the wounds are the same. Mordred dies, killed by Arthur. Arthur gets his death wound. Arthur's carried off by the ladies of the lake as Excalibur is thrown into the water. Arthur is seen as mortally wounded, but dead, and never seen again, potentially to return as the hero of Britain. But Derfel doesn't give us how all these other people die, including, Galahad, Guidry. So I also wonder, because you would think that if they had survived, they would come back and try and mount an insurrection and seize power. And, Guidry was put up by even Arthur himself to be potentially, he was going to replace him with Mordred. That was Guinevere's hope as well. Like, you just wonder what happened to them all, right?
Well, there's a magical element that's suggested by the fact that this ship was enlisted by Merlin.
Yes.
And he put the talisman there on the front of the ship. And there was no other way to get to wherever it was they were going to go, because they had to have that sacred magic talisman to get there. And he said, this is the last thing I'm doing for Arthur and for you, Derfel. And Derfel stays behind with Kynwyn stays with him. And we don't know when she dies, but she dies sometime later of a fever. That's all we know.
Yeah.
But it's left ambiguous. He leaves it ambiguous there at the end, doesn't he? Yeah. Will?
Yeah, I mean, this time around, leaning more into the fantasy element, I thought that could be another part of why it's so sad that Derval doesn't see a return. Maybe Arthur does return. Maybe he has a haven that no one can really reach. Actually, a few weeks ago, Mama and Papa Gwynne went to Tintagel, which has got an Arthurian and got me there. So they know me very well. They know how to make me happy. And then you find these kind of remnants around the country of kind of people hundreds of years later building statues and inscriptions, basically hoping Arthur will return. And so we're still hoping for that to happen. So maybe Bernard Cornwell is onto something, leaving it ambiguous.
I had this image almost as if the boat, was being carried away on the river Styx by Charon, the ferryman of the dead. Yeah. And it just vanishes into history, never to be seen again. And Galahad, this ancient hero, and everyone else just, like Arthur, vanishes. And then, as Will said, we're waiting for them to come back. I read the Fionarvor tapestry by Guy Gavriel Kay. He incorporates some Arthurian legend in his beautiful, stunning fantasy trilogy. And I highly recommended that if you'd like to see read something about Arthur coming back, that was wonderfully done.
Okay, I'll be reading it next month, actually. Yeah.
Guy Gavriel Kay, you're going to be reading it?
I'm reading the Fionarvor tapestry starting next month. Yeah.
It is stunning. There are some moments there that are, and that's his first Guy Gabriel Kay's first novels. There are some writing in there that there are moments. It's not perfect. Like no writer's perfect. Certainly I'm not either. But there are some moments there that are absolutely. Will, have you read that one?
I haven't, but it's on the list now.
There's some moments there that you are absolutely stunning.
Alan's got a point here. We've got the Dervel versus Lancelot, and it's peak only because it's not like an epic, combat or anything. It's pretty one-sided. Lancelot is pretty much a coward, really.
But he's not that inept as a warrior, though. And Dervel makes a point of commenting for all of his cowardice.
He wasn't too shabby.
He wasn't that bad. He wasn't up to Dervel's level, of course. But
no.
You would think that he can't fight at all because he's a coward. He's always running away. But he actually wasn't. Can you imagine if maybe he would have fought? So.
We lost PL again. We'll come back to PL if when you come back. But totally agree with this, Alan. He does get what's coming to him.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really get a very noble death either. He is hanged, in fact. And even Galahad does not object. In fact, Galahad, a small act of mercy, pulls on his feet to make him die a little bit faster, right? So, Will, what's your take on that?
I thought it's so clever that Bernard. I think some writers fall into the trap of making each death kind of epic and climactic, especially with our main villains. There has to be an epic battle or something, a bit of dialogue that's really powerful and everyone's listening. And this was just perfect and really well made for Lancelot. It's a whimper. And he does have a moment of, he is a great warrior, but there's no joy in it, really. There's just there's satisfaction in justice has been done. But there's no joy. There's no song and dance. It's basically the opposite of what Lancelot would want. And that makes it quite
he gets the songs later on, though, that celebrate his warriorhood.
That I prefer to ignore that. But I just think that really shows Bernard Cornwell, again, as I've said before, I'm repeating myself, understands the reader. They don't just want 7 duels with our large audiences watching and basically the same scene again and again. Right. It shows real variation. And again, Lancelot hiding for 4 days. It's classic Lancelot. Of course he was, but he gets captured this time.
Sorry, PL, you got cut off when you were in the middle of your point. I don't know if you wanted to finish that or not.
No, just quickly, and thank you. Apologies again. Just quickly, I just wanted to mention that I had said this before in the previous chat for Will. One of my favorite movies of all time is the Excalibur film with Nigel Terry. It's old. It's made in 1981, but it is still a masterpiece, right? And for me, visually, that is my visual conception of the tale of Arthur. And in that movie, Lancelot, of course, he is the peerless hero. His only fault is loving and sleeping with Guinevere. I'm not spoiling this for everybody. I mean, this movie's been out for decades, and it's quite celebrated.
It happens in every version, anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So, but in that version, Arthur finds Guinevere to convent essentially, and they reconcile, and she gives him back Excalibur, and Lancelot, this flawed hero, comes to Arthur's aid in final battle against Mordred and dies a true knight. Typically that is the version.
No.
Yeah, well, that's the version that most people are familiar with from their experience with Arthurian tales. But I think that is so appropriate especially for me as a reader, to sit there thinking, wow, was Lancelot this peerless? This is the first time in my mind, my image of Lancelot was disrupted, because it's ingrained from especially that movie and all the other legends I've read. But Cornwell finally gave me a version that not only made me think, but that I actually love, and I prefer this version. I prefer now to think of Lancelot as this messed up, cowardly, reprehensible figure, right? And I don't know if, paradoxically, what does that say about me? Does that mean that I'm the twisted one? Like, you know what I mean? But I prefer this Cornwell's version. So
it's genius.
Will, you're being asked by Alan, who's worse, Lancelot from the Warlord Chronicles or Hakeswill from Sharp? I think, Alan, you're the only one who's really qualified to answer that, but what's your answer, Will?
I haven't actually read Sharp, but he does have my name in his name, so I'm hoping he's not quite as nasty as Lancelot.
That's a good point. I'm familiar with Hakeswill, and I know how much you hate him, Alan. But Lancelot does give him a run for his money. So, which one is worse to you, Alan? That's the real question.
I feel like with Lancelot, it's the way that he kind of wins in the end with his stories that is, as we've already touched on, really gets to me.
That's a really great point Mick Scarfield is making here, which is another character I had pretty much decided to not like very much was Guinevere from the previous book. Guinevere got caught with her pants down or whatever, and she was basically the villain of the day.
Yeah.
But at the same time in this book, like Dervel, maybe he does it through Dervel, he gets me to like Guinevere because Dervel starts to have a relationship with her. Obviously it's a friendship. They start forming a friendship, and my respect for her grew. And also the observation that Nimue made in the previous book about Guinevere just being a brilliant woman who was essentially underestimated, not given a chance to exercise her intelligence. Yes, she's extremely ambitious, but Nimue saw that, and the men didn't. Arthur didn't get it. He wanted her to be a housewife. Dervel is just too dumb to get it, right?
Yeah.
And Nimue understood her, and so when Guinevere contributes on Mount Baden and has this idea to have the carts, set alight and launch into the Saxon shield wall, I was like, yeah, you go, girl, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. How did you guys feel about Guinevere in this? Did she get redeemed for you?
Well, sorry, but she fought extremely bravely. She fought bravely, hand to hand, like any of the warriors that were men. She showed her cunning and her genius, as you mentioned, Philip. And she also was very someone who was supportive of Dervel in his command and helped, I think, actually contribute to the morale of the troops greatly. Yeah. And for someone who otherwise, was somewhat ostracized or because everybody knows what she did to Arthur, I think, at least in terms of, I think she redeemed herself. I don't know if this makes sense. She redeemed herself, I think, to the characters within the book by her actions, because anyone who acts with courage and fortitude in a battle will usually get some measure of respect. So I think that, she certainly redeemed herself, I think, to some of the characters in the book. They may not trust her and want to have a beer with her, so to speak, but I think she proved that she was worthy, certainly, of being Arthur's mate. I know for me, I think, I always loved Guinevere's political ambition. I know for Will, I think you're a lover of, in some ways, I believe it's pronounced Gormla from Shauna Lawless's Gale Saw. Philip, I'm not sure if you've read that series.
I've read the first book, yeah.
Yeah.
Gods and Fighting Men, yeah.
Gormla is my fave, man. She's just, I love that character. I just finished the series. It is amazing. So I love complicated characters, but strong, powerful women that are complex and, are ambitious and have their own machinations. I love that, and I love that about Guinevere.
Yeah, definitely. I think she's not someone I'd like to go for a drink with and become best friends with, but I love following her as a character. And something again that stands out about Cornwell is Dervel and Guinevere, they strike up this friendship at the battle. And any other writer, I think, or 90% of them, would then have this great friendship that lasts the rest of their lives. But then we jump, I think it's about maybe 10 years later, and there's a mention kind of on the side where Dervel says, oh, we drifted apart. There's always a respect, but yeah, we drifted apart from each other and we helped each other in times of need. I just think that's fantastic. It's so true to life that you can have a connection of an experience together, but that doesn't mean that you're going to be kind of skipping in fields for the rest of your life and enjoying each other's company, because they have such different approaches to life. As we've said, Dervel was very just down to earth, very stoic at times, and just very drawn back and very simple. He's very loyal. He wants a happy life with his family. he will fight to maintain that, but he's not a warmongerer. And then Guinevere is very ambitious. And so they kind of clash in that respect. And so I love that they have this friendship in time of need. And we really see Guinevere's perspective. That means I don't dislike her, but I'm not a huge fan of her on the other side as well. But then you love what she does for the characters in that moment of need.
Yeah. How did you two feel? Another ambiguous character, I think, in some ways, definitely more likable, at least on the surface, is Merlin. And I'm wondering how you guys felt about his demise, the end of Merlin, which with Nimue cutting his throat, and he'd already been blinded, and essentially she had parasitically sucked his magic out of him. And, it was just this kind of really, I felt actually that I don't blame her in some ways, because he certainly did use her over the years. He used her in many, many ways. So it was a little bit of poetic justice maybe for Merlin at the end. But what did you guys think? What's your take? And then the devastating storm unleashed, more magic, by the way, the storm unleashed by a druid's death. Pretty awesome. Really, I thought that was a brilliant touch as well. What are your thoughts on Merlin and his demise?
PL, do you want to go first?
Okay, well, again, I thought it was tragic, beautiful, but then this image of Merlin still essentially protecting the boat as his body is floating, his throat cut. He's floating until, hey, Wolf Mantilla, how's it going? Wonderful person. Yep. Michael Delaney, a great blogger. He's floating, his throat cut until he finally disappears, but he's done his job. In the end, he still protected Durfell. He still looked up for Durfell all this time. Yeah. And but yes, was it a fitting end for Merlin? I think so, because I believe in a way that Merlin's only desire was to see the gods return. And I feel that this book is also very much, we talked about this. This is the transitory period between the old gods of Britain and the Christian gods, and now the Christian gods have sway, and the place for people such as Merlin and Nimue has passed. So they faded into antiquity, and now the Christians will rise and have taken over and are dominating Britain. So I feel it was a fitting send-off, and it's very symbolic of the death of the old gods with Merlin's passing. He was their caretaker. Yes, Nimue, but Merlin truly, as a druid, he was their caretaker, and now he's gone along with the old gods, and their influence has faded as well. So I thought it was a fitting end, tragic, but fitting.
Yeah, I think Bernard Cornwell does a great job at the passing of the torch, that life is transitory and the different generations are rising up, and there's a cycle of violence. And I think he does that really well, whilst giving us a satisfying end to Merlin, even though it's so horrible and it is so devastating, because really Merlin is our final link to Devil's childhood. His father's died. We've had those revelations of who his parents were. And we see that even though Merlin can be so horrible and very cutthroat at times, his love for Arthur and Derval is his downfall. And that image of his body floating by the boat, protecting them still in the storm. Just when you think Bernard Cornwell can't drive the knife any deeper, he does, and he causes more pain. I think it is a very fitting end for Merlin. And also at the same time, whilst really satisfying, subverted my expectations. I thought first time round that Merlin would be on the boat and go off with Arthur. And the ambiguity would be of Merlin looking after Arthur, and one day they will return with his magic. Whereas we're denied that. And so it is really the death of magic in that sense. And the scene where Derval finds Merlin with his eyes out, and there's some semblance of,
in the camp of Nimue's crazy elders.
Yeah, it's just so human, isn't it? Even though you're filled by this magic and otherworldly experience, you kind of snap back to the humanity that Bernard Cornwell does such a great job with.
And he's more than half mad at that point. He has moments of lucidity, and he's there and back, and he's sort of throwing a bone to Derval, trying to help him. And that's a gut-wrenching scene when he finds him in that cave. Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah.
So another moment I wanted to talk about, and it's another Mount Baden moment. So many great moments for me in Mount Baden, but something really well done here was the death of Allah.
Yes.
The leader of the the angles. Actually, he explains this to Dervel at one point. Actually, I'm not a Saxon. I'm an Angle.
Yes.
But he has another heart-wrenching scene. He has his son, his best son, as he I think he was probably my best son. He has to kill him. He wants to be killed in battle. He wants to go to Valhalla, essentially, and that was a powerful one, I thought. What did you guys think?
Yeah,
absolutely, and of course fulfilling the prophecy that Derfel was aware of, that Derfel couldn't see how this prophecy would come to fruition, how his father Ael would be killed by one of his sons. Derfel does meet several of Ael's illegitimate sons when he goes and is nearly killed as an envoy. So he's aware that his father has many sons. His father is proclivities for promiscuity, like most of the lords in that time are well known. However, it's Derfel that ends up doing it as an act of mercy, essentially, because Ael is dying of his wounds and is going to suffer. So it is an act of mercy. We talked about mercy, before. So I think that scene was extremely powerful. And again, it just makes you feel so sad for Derfel. He never got to know his mother properly. He finds her as essentially this old hag, and she was once beautiful and certainly attracted Ael's attention, and now she's decrepit, and she can already see, and she's living in poverty. And then with Ael, Derfel always liked Ael. He respected him as a warlord, as as someone who was clever, and found himself really craving that fatherly figure, that fatherly relationship, but knowing that he was going to be his enemy and that always be on the other side, on enemy sides. But it was sad to see everyone that Derfel loves is taken from him, right? And the tragedy of their relationship, in that they were destined to be enemies in the first place, is sad. But I think it's even more sad that Derfel's the one that ends up taking his life. Poetic, beautiful, but again, just adding to the tragedy and the heft of the dark themes in this brilliant.
Yeah, there's two parts of this scene that I really love. Firstly, it's the first time someone Devil cares about is on the opposite side. Everyone before who he loses is on his side. And in book 1 and 2, in the battles, it's you want everyone on his side of the shield wall to survive and everyone on the other side to lose, basically. Whereas this is where the waters are muddied. And I thought that was a brilliant choice to add even more layers to Excalibur. And the other part is that Devil doesn't talk about it. And then I've forgotten the name of the queen who kind of asks him, but what happened to Aela? And it just hits so hard that he's left it out. He cannot, even after all these years, bear to talk about it. And she asks, is it Igraine, maybe?
Igraine.
Yes,
yeah, Igraine. And she asks, and he then, with a really just concisely talks about what happened. I think it's within a page. And it is so short and concise and powerful because of that, because we're in the mind of Derfel and how it's so painful to him all these years later.
Yeah, that's it. And again, that's a moment when Cornwell's choice to have this frame narrative really shines. It's one of my favorite aspects of this. So we have Mick Garfield commenting here. Yeah, absolutely true. Great antagonist in here, and also Mick Garfield letting us know, PL, that he is possibly, and I don't know if I would tell this publicly or not, Mick Garfield, but he is possibly the great, and on grandson of Gormla. So yeah,
I'm not surprised, Max Garfield, that you're descendant of royalty. I am not surprised at all, because that is your character, your noble character. But I will also say quickly that I feel like, again, these parallels, and again, if you've read the Saxon Stories, Warlord Chronicles, you have, again, this transitory period between the Britons and the Saxons, and then of course in the Warlord Chronicles you have the the Saxons now have taken over, the entire of Britain, and their influence only encroaching, and the goal is to put together, finally to have one king, one ruler over the entirety of the land. And of course, whereas we see in the Warlord Chronicles, there's all these separate kingdoms. There's a high king. However, it's still very fractious, right? But I love the element of, if you've read both series, especially looking forward and looking back and seeing, how history, according to Cornwell, developed. And Cornwell, as we talked about, admits he takes lots of license. He's very liberal with some of the events, but the main thrust is the same. And I love reading that between. It's enhanced my enjoyment of both series.
Yeah, it reminds me of a quote, Mark Twain. I think he said, "History doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme."
Yeah,
and we see that in the series.
Yes. And you get these slime balls like Merig and Samson, who end up winners in all of this somehow. And it feels true to life, because a lot of times less than let's just put it this way, less than stellar individuals end up in positions of power, and often it's because they're more ambitious, not capable. But you get some real slimy characters who benefit at the end. Merig is there waiting for the outcome of Mordred and Arthur's battle, and he swoops in at the right moment. So they're kind of like, winners are the clever ones, not the honorable ones here. Yeah.
I want to quickly say, so many deaths hit me hardest, but Sagramor's death hit me hard in the soul. I cried tears, the real tears for him. I think the element of him being the outsider in this world, and he swore himself to Arthur because he said Arthur gave him everything, and that's why he followed Arthur and was his loyal vassal. And he had the very unheralded but critical task of holding that part of the kingdom from the invasion. He held essentially the Stonehenge area of Britain, from protect that frontier, faithfully. He was Arthur's, one of his main war commanders, and he was such a stoic, loyal, tough, determined character that people were scared of course, because he was black. And he would, in that context, he would have been like some kind of a demon. And but he was such a fierce, uncompromising warrior who sacrificed himself, to say. And I that one just, that was.
He's my favorite secondary character. I think one day if I become a writer, I think it's a lesson in how you can create a character off page, because really until Excalibur, we don't see too much of him, but he looms larger than life. And if I could have one wish for this trilogy, it would be, as I was saying earlier, about more time with characters. He's the number one I'd love to see more of, because every conversation he has with Derval, I felt was so magnetic. And it felt like Bernard Cornwell just really felt his voice very naturally. And there's such emotional moments with him. And he is my favorite secondary character. And I wish we saw a bit more of him in Enemy of God and the Winter King.
Yeah, I just want to say quickly, I know Philip's got to get in there about Sagamore if you have any comments, but he's someone who, because he's so well traveled, he comes with all these stories that people think are fantastical. Sagamore never saw a lion, he never saw this. This is all just, he's making that up. But they don't realize, of course, that he is not from Britain. He is not native Britain. He has traveled, and he has seen things that potentially are real. But I think people also forget too that Sagamore is the one that inducts Derfel into Mithras. Sagamore is the one. There's that scene in the bath when he and Derfel are chatting.
Oh no!
No.
PL always cuts out like the most crucial moment. But when they are chatting in the bath, and I will say, until he comes back, and let him finish when he's back, I think every time Sagamore shows up on page and has these conversations with Derval, especially, it's like a touchstone moment in the story. Yeah. It's sort of a, it feels almost legendary when those two get together and chat, and these are just moments of deep reflection. And this is a guy who has not a lot of words, but the few he has, you pay attention to. So sorry, PL, we were in the bath when you cut out.
No, sorry. Just quickly to and I apologize again so much to everyone watching, and both of you from the internet. But what I want to quickly say is that Durfell mentions that once now later on looking back in life, he's a priest. He's like, you know what? One thing I miss is the company of warriors. You know what? I know that I should care solely about the fact that now, fortunately, I'm converted. I've seen the true God. I am, no longer a heathen. But boy, do I miss, those moments of bonding with my bros, from the battlefield.
Yeah.
The things that brought us together. And that was essentially the best time of my life. As horrible as it was, as scary as all these battles were, I really miss that camaraderie. I miss the people like Sagramore, because that part of my life made me who I am, I think, is what he's essentially saying. And
yeah. And I feel there's so much tragedy of Sagramore in that we see in a lot of Excalibur the good years that Dervahl has is in Siluria with his family, with Arthur, with Guinevere. But the entire time, Sagramore is holding the borders. He is just a figure of loyalty and sacrifice, and that is everything he represents. And because of his love for Arthur, that he does not complain once. And there is so much tragedy in there, and that makes his final moments very poetic, but very painful.
Yeah. So we'll be finishing pretty soon, but I want to give you guys a chance to give your last final thoughts. Before we do that, I do want to mention Gwynne as a favorite character because we brought her up here and there, but I feel like she should get a lot of credit in this story too. That a lot of the reason where I did find the story most emotional was in the relationship between Dervahl and Gwynne. And it's partly because I mentioned the scene earlier where he gives his hand and so much more to save her life. But I also feel that she is equally as devoted and a figure of real strength and courage in this story. So I really, as much as my jaw's hanging open at the tragedy of Nimue, who becomes really in some ways the major antagonist along with Mordred at the end. I do feel like Gwynne is such a wonderful character. And Guinevere also being a really complex one. So I like the female characters in this were I thought really interesting and complex and well executed.
Common really comes into her own, I think, in Excalibur. Always with characters in fiction, I think if you want to root for them, especially when they're in warfare, you need to know their reasons for being in that. And such a big reason for Dervahl is the life of his family. And there aren't really passages where he kind of waxes lyrical about how much he loves Gwynne, but it's just so evident in his actions. And that's even more powerful that he can't even summarize how much he loves her, but that never strays.
And the brooch that he keeps, the one thing that he's kept all the years.
Yeah. It's just Bernard Cornwell. I don't know. I imagine he just has strokes of genius just as he's writing, and he makes it seem like it's planned from the beginning. Or maybe he's like UPL and he plans from the very beginning. But whatever process it is, he had so many little moments of genius that means so much when all compiled together.
Cool. All right. So we have arrived at the moment when I think we'll be giving our final thoughts on the Warlord Chronicles. So PL, would you like to lead us in your final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Thanks so much. So again, Philip, for hosting this and the honor and pleasure of the company with you and Will. It's always a great day when I get to hang out with you, gents.
Oh, no.
Poor PL.
Oh, it's fine. We'll come back to PL. Will, your final thoughts. And I will say before PL comes back that I will have, when this goes on YouTube, I will fix it up so that the links are there for the Brothers Gwynne and for PL's channel. PL's just I guess I can embarrass him because he's not here. Sort of wonderful. Oh, there he is. I was just going to tell everyone how wonderful you are, PL. PL is just a delightful individual. And we've seen Will hold up his book. That's the first book in the Drowned Kingdom saga. Excellent, epic inspired fantasy. You guys check it out. PL, why don't you finish what you were saying, though?
And I apologize again for that. Quickly, my favorite trilogy of all time, the best Arthurian interpretation that I believe I've read, and I've read a lot. I encourage you, if you want to feel the pathos, but I'd say as an entry point for those of you who like a fantasy that is gripping, the battle scenes, as Will mentioned, very few authors write medieval combat scenes as brilliantly as Bernard Cornwell does. I think Miles Cameron, Jenny Wirtz, Joe Abercrombie, there's only a few, but on that list, Bernard Cornwell belongs at a list. So if you want to read it just for the battle scenes, believe me, that in itself makes this worth the investment. But the characters, again, the poignancy, the pathos, I think this is a brilliantly and in many ways original retelling of Arthurian legend that I think is very much worth your time.
Yeah, beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Great pitch. Yeah, just say this first time I've actually had a chat with PL after reading A Drowned Kingdom, and I have to say that this has got a similar tone in some ways. The narrative drive, I'd say, is even stronger in A Drowned Kingdom. That's something I love about the Warlord Chronicles, and even if you don't know what's coming next, you feel a need, a real fire to carry on to the next chapter. So thanks, PL, for putting me behind on my uni reading, but I loved reading.
Well, I apologize, just so you know, there might be something in the mail that may unfortunately throw a wrench to that again. But I mean, I know it may be a while until that happens, but just so you know.
If Will fails out of uni, it's your fault, PL.
Yeah. I'll send them your way. And I've actually bought book 2 on Kindle, so it's ready, but thank you. That's really kind of you. So The Winter King, the first time I read it, I thought the first 150 pages were the weakest of the trilogy. Quite a bit of exposition before we get into. I really thought the moment it kicked off is when they run into a field and Owain surrounds them, and then Arthur arrives. But on a reread, I found the build-up of characters such as Owain and Arthur and Sagramore is just truly exceptional from Bernard Cornwell. I really respected it a lot more this time around, and I thought it was a lot stronger than the first time I read it. Enemy of God, some of the most emotional moments I've ever read when Derval comes back and his family home is being burned down. Oh my word, just Papa Gwynne said that is one of the greatest scenes he's ever read, and when he thinks about how to connect with the reader, he often flicks back to that scene, because I think that's something that Bernard Cornwell does in these two and Excalibur, is that he gives us
Ian as well. That when he comes back to the burning,
that's the scene, and his warriors are holding him back.
Yeah,
it's so powerful, and I think that Bernard Cornwell understands that a reader needs to be entertained and engaged, but I also think the best books explore what it means to be human in a way that allows us to still be immersed in the story and not dragged out of it. And he manages to do that in such an incredible way. He may not maintain 100% to the history, but you feel so immersed in the culture. How much is true and how much is made up, we don't know. But really, in a way, it doesn't matter because this isn't a non-fiction. Bernard Cornwell is not saying this is really what happened. I'd like to think that there was an Arthur who kind of stood for good once. Maybe unlikely, but I'd like to think so. I think this is a series that it's one of those rare ones that I would recommend to 90% of people, because it's got a real drive to the narrative. It is so character driven, but there's a lot of plot there as well. A lot of Easter eggs and things that I think Arthurian legend is really just in kind of mass knowledge now. And the way he subverts those expectations whilst also giving you satisfying conclusions is brilliant, because it must be so daunting as a writer to pick up on things that people already have so much attachment to, and to change them in a way that they're not going to get angry and they're actually going to enjoy. I imagine it's terrifying, but Bernard Cornwell, if anyone's able to do it, he is. And I recommend this series to everybody, and I'll talk about it to anybody.
Fantastic.
Very well said. Exceptionally well said.
Beautifully said. Yeah. It's Bernard Cornwell, great historical fiction author who understands that story comes first. And that's what makes this a great book. Also, he wrote a great fantasy trilogy in the Warlord Chronicles.
I have to say I agree. I've been swayed.
The eternal debate. I love it.
Oh dear. Well, I want to thank you both. This has been a lot of fun. We missed our comrades, our good friends, Ed, and also the two gents from 2toRamble. But we may get to talk with them about this in the future. We shall see. But you two have made this wonderful, and I want to thank you both. And once again, there will be links to Will, by the way, is not just a Brothers Gwynne. He also has his own channel. I'll put a link to that one as well.
Yes.
And PL has his channel, the Drowned Kingdom Saga. So yeah, everybody go give them some love, please. And that's
read The Way of Edan and everything Edan, because
Of
it
course.
is absolutely
It's been such
fabulous.
a wonderful pleasure not to just talk to two incredible authors, but two who just have such passion for reading and so eloquent as well. Just everything you're saying, it's just got light bulbs in my head thinking I hadn't thought of it in that way. Oh, yes, in that direction. I just love it. This is what kind of BookTube's about, finding people who, even if you don't agree on everything, talking about the books you love. And that's just, there's no price on that.
100%. All right. Well, thank you all. And thank you, everybody here in the chat. And thank you to Team Replay when you show up as well. But that is it for us for now. Till next time, everybody.